Thank you. I'll do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Could you verify we're in compliance with open meetings?
Yes, we are.
Thank you. Looking for a motion to approve or to make changes to the order of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Midge, second by Wayne. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. We have three meeting minutes, A and B, but there's two on B. I would be, if you all had a chance to look at them and there's no questions, I would look for a motion to accept those.
Motion to accept all.
All three?
Yeah, all three.
Casey? And second by John. Any other discussion or
I'll
discussion?
abstain because I wasn't at the meetings.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? One abstained by Wayne. Thank you. Anybody here for public comment? Anyone in the audience have any public comment? And the last time for public comment, seeing none. Did everyone have a chance to look at the bills? And are there any questions?
If there are no questions, I'll move for adoption. Second.
Motion by Wayne, second by Lee. Roll call, Aaron?
Swedberg,
Yes.
Ortlieb,
Here? Yes.
Boer,
Yes.
Wayne Schmidt,
Yes.
Dashlet,
Yes.
Kevin Schmidt, Meverden.
Yes.
Thank you. I don't believe there's any conference attendance.
Not at this time.
And a bunch of committee reports. Did everyone have a chance to look over all the committee reports?
I have a question
Okay,
on the Park and Rec. I was reading that and I see that the school is moving the football field back up to the high school as of 2025.
They're hoping to.
That scoreboard, is that the football scoreboard or the baseball one?
Baseball.
Okay. Thank you.
any other questions? If not, I would look for a motion to accept them all. Moved by Kevin.
Second.
Second by Wayne. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. License applications, right?
There's no new liquor license applications that have to come before you, but you do have the new operator's license, the renewal operator's license, and then the temporary Class B licenses. There is one that is not on this list, and it is for the Algoma Fire Department Association for Shanty Days as well, and that would just be a regular Class B, not the combination. Does anybody have any questions?
I make a motion to approve it.
Motion by Lee,
I'll second.
second by John.
So we are approving the fire department tonight.
Yep. Yeah, and, yeah, yes.
So we can just write it on.
Yep. It'll just get added to the minutes.
Okay.
Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. Don't see any old business, I don't believe. New business. I think everybody has paper from Jamie for the audit, and I would be looking for a motion to accept receipt of the audit. Oh,
Brian is here from CLA to present on it, and he'll kind of run through it.
so before they,
Yes,
Okay,
and then we will
gotcha.
accept it at the end, if that's
okay,
okay with you, Mayor?
you bet, absolutely, sorry. Hi, Brian.
Hello. Sounds good. Thank you for having me here this evening. I'm Brian Grunewald with Clifton Arsenal. And just as a reminder, in terms of the audit and the audit documents, we provide the audited financial statements, the large bound document, and then we also issue a governance letter. This is typically stuck in the back cover of the bound copy of the financial statements. For purposes of tonight's discussion, I just put together a brief PowerPoint Just wanted to walk through a few things at a pretty high level, and keep in mind this is for your benefit, so if there are any specific topics or questions that you'd like me to get into, I'd be happy to try to address those. In terms of the slides, I'm just going to walk through the handout that you have in front of you, and again, just trying to give you an overview of the audit. So you can see the first slide listed as a summary of audit results. Included within the audited financial statements, there's actually two different reports. The first is labeled as the auditor's report on the basic financial statements. That is considered to be an unmodified opinion. The language in there is very standard. It's considered to be a clean opinion. It's the highest level of assurance that you can receive. It really means that I believe that the financial statements that you have in front of you are complete and accurate and in accordance with our professional standards, meaning they also include all required footnote disclosures and supplementary information. So that's exactly what you should hope or expect to see. And again, just as a reminder, that's on pages 1 through 4 of this document. In addition to that, we are also required to consider the city's internal control structure. We do not give an opinion on internal control, but we are required to gain an understanding of the process. Think of that as how you handle cash, how you pay your bills, how you pay your payroll, for example. When we become aware of items related to financial internal control, we're required to disclose those. So we've done that. You can see the bullet points there with the comments that we have listed. Those are all repeat comments. And you can see more detail on pages 66 through 70 of the financial statements. I'll just give you a real brief overview of each of those comments. And again, if anyone wants me to elaborate a little bit more, just please let me know. The first comment there is labeled as 23-1, preparation of the financial statements. I always describe that as we as your auditors are the ones who are preparing this financial statement. In an ideal accounting 101 type environment, the city would be preparing this, and we would be just doing the audit and issuing our opinion on the financial statements. That process, what's been done in the past, very, very common for how we work with our clients across the state, really done as a matter of convenience to help you out and to prepare that document. So we're hired to do the audit, but we're also hired to prepare your financial statements. And as a part of that process, we do share a draft. We do share any adjustments that we propose as part of that process. Again, the purpose of that is to make sure that we're on the same page with regards to the numbers and the adjustments that are included in your financial statements. Again, very, very common for organizations of your size. The second item there listed as 23-2, adjustments to the city's financial records. As part of the audit process, we do ask for a lot of financial information, so thank you for digging all that up. As part of that, we do look at what's recorded in your financial system. There are areas that we help. We propose adjustments. For example, we help with some of the capital asset accounting and depreciating those capital assets for the sewer system. We also help with things like looking at the tax roll and making sure that that's closed out properly. So there are adjustments that we propose as part of that process. Again, we do share those with your team. We ask them to review those and make sure that we're on the same page and that we agree with those adjustments. But again, just disclosing that we help as part of that process. And then the last item there is listed as number 3, 2023-3, segregation of duties. Again, because of the size of your team and some of the transition and turnover that occurred during the audit year, just a reminder that we always look at how things are done, that systems of checks and balances. We like to look at how things are initiated versus how they're approved and what kind of documentation we have. Because of the size of the city, very common to have a comment related to segregation of duties included as part of the process here as well. Again, all 3 of those are repeat findings. There is a lot of information included in here and a lot more detailed discussion related to those. If you have any further questions on those, I'd be happy to elaborate further. Any thoughts, questions, comments? Okay, then I'm going to jump ahead and continue. The next slide, labeled as the governance communications. Again, I put this slide in here, and it's really just intended to give you an overview of what's included within this letter. I would describe that letter as very standardized. The language, the terminology, the topics that you see on the slide in front of you, all things that we're required to disclose and discuss as part of the audit process. So again, that's why I'm putting that out in front of you. In terms of things that I see that are items that I guess I'd want to emphasize under the discussion of significant accounting policies. I feel like every year I come here and I talk about governmental accounting standards and things that we have to implement. There was a new standard by the Governmental Accounting Standards Board. It's statement number 96. It deals with information technology arrangements. We were required to implement that, again, by professional standards. So we've done that with all of our clients in Wisconsin, all of our governmental clients within Wisconsin. There's some language included in your governance letter that talks about that new standard. And then also, as I mentioned previously, the discussion of audit adjustments right in the middle of the slide. Again, just there is some disclosure about some of the areas that we help with as part of the audit process. But the rest of that I would say is standardized language, nothing unusual, nothing that I would say is a red flag by any means, but just wanted to point that out. Any of those topics catch anybody's attention? Anything you'd like me to talk about further? It is very standardized, and a lot of that language is very consistent from one year to the next. Okay, then I'm just going to keep moving along. The next slide you can see is labeled as the general fund. You can see the 3 different years in the bar graph presented there. I just really wanted to step back, I like to look at trends, just wanted to give you a snapshot or overview of what your general fund and your fund balance reserves look like. So think of this as your cumulative reserves when you think of your revenues versus your expenses and your annual budget. These are the reserves that are left, and they build up year after year depending on what's happened in the past. If I work across that, for 2021, if you add up the total of all of those categories listed there, your total fund balance reserves were approximately 3.1 million. At the end of 2022, the sum of all those categories add up to approximately 3.5 million. If you get to the end of 2023, the totals add up to approximately 3.8 million. So what I see is a slow, steady increase. The conservative accountant in me says that's certainly very positive to see slow and steady, and also not seeing a lot of fluctuations. In terms of your overall results for 2023, your revenues for your general fund, and this is only looking at your general fund exceeded your expenses by $247,954. From a budgetary perspective, your revenues exceeded your budget by $119,000, and it's primarily due to interest income and just what's happened with market rates and the increases in interest rates, going from very low rates a couple years ago, like 0.2%, seeing some nicer returns on your investment balances, really driving the increase in your investment income. On the expense side, in terms of comparison to budget, overall your expenses for your general fund coming in under budget by just over $100,000. So that's really what's driving that ratio of revenues versus expenses and the increase in your overall reserves.
Brian, what is non-spendable?
So
Why does it fluctuate like that?
Yeah, when you look at the different categories there, those are all defined by our professional standards, so we have to present those, and I'm just going to walk through each of those categories for a second. The non-spendable is dollars that you have, but they've been set aside for other purposes, and because of that, we don't want you to spend those dollars, which is why we earmark them as non-spendable, until you would get the cash back. What's included in there at the end of 2023 is, if you think of the financial condition of some of your TIF districts, some of them are in a deficit position with their equity reserves, so they've borrowed money from your general fund. That is all tracked, it's accounted for, and obviously the goal is to make sure that repayments come in. From a fund balance perspective, since you borrowed those TIFs that money, we got to label it as non-spendable until those TIFs actually give you the cash back and repay those balances. Does that make sense? Okay, so it's really, I'll call it borrowing to other funds. It's very common for that to occur, especially when you think of the life of a tax incremental district. They all have a statutory life. Very common to have an upfront investment that you have to make, and you're making that with the goal of generating tax incremental revenue and ultimately trying to be able to repay or recover your investment. So very common to have some of those deficits or borrowings upfront. Does that answer your question? Okay. The restricted and committed category, that green category, again, you see a little bit of fluctuation there. And I just want to point out, there is more detail on pages 52 and 53 within your audited financial statements. The restricted and committed categories, there are times where you receive certain types of revenue. Think of grant funding or donations, where it's certainly possible that a donor gives you money, a donation, but they also might say, well, you have to spend it for this purpose. Those are all tracked. The revenue sources are all tracked. And when you do that, again, they're being set aside until you spend it for that purpose or you meet the obligation of that revenue source. And then the unassigned category, the blue category, that's really what's left. In terms of benchmarking, if you would talk to a financial consultant or a bond advisor, that blue category, that unassigned, is what they would really focus on. And they're really trying to see how much liquidity you have, what reserves do you really have that are technically available or for working capital and contingency reserves. So you can see how that's fluctuated over time. At the end of 2021, you were at 2.1 million, increased to 2.6 for 2022, and then increasing to 2.8 at the end of 2023. So again, when I step back and look at this graph with your general fund and your fund balance, to me, the biggest thing is that you are steady and consistent, and you don't see a lot of fluctuation where that's not planned. I mean, certainly there could be times where you plan to use some fund balance and it comes down. Some communities that I work with, they can have a lot of volatility in terms of their overall fund balance. I think you guys do a great job of establishing your budget, monitoring your budget, and staying on track with that, which is why I think you see that consistency in terms of your balances. I know there's a lot of information there. Any thoughts, questions, comments? Okay. Certainly healthy trend and healthy unassigned fund balance.
Is there for a city our size, is there some kind of a scale to measure that by, like where we're at on that
So
scale?
there are organizations out there like Standards and Poor's rating agencies, bond advisors. There's a national organization, the Government Finance Officers Association. They express that in terms of ranges. They look at that unassigned category, and what they really do is look at what are the unassigned dollars that you have versus the size of your budget. What are the expenses flowing through your budget? Typically to be in that 20 to 25% range is considered to be strong. I can tell you that your balances are over that. And I think my perspective on that is that's certainly positive financially, and it gives you the opportunity to plan about what do we have, what are our needs, do we want to use some of this? You certainly could. The one caveat or item that I always try to tell people is you don't want to be in a position where you're using unassigned fund balance to balance your budget for recurring costs. Like if you want to say we're going to add positions and use fund balance to fund that, I'm going to say, well, what happens when the fund balance goes away? Then that position's got to go away. So if you'd say we want to use some for a one-time non-recurring cost, I think that's certainly a fair discussion and a better use if you're going to talk about using any of those reserves.
Sure. What about, and I'm glad we're where we're at, but compare that, what we carry as a balance to what we borrow. Should we be balancing that better?
I guess I would put it back in the context of it's certainly a planning opportunity, and I know there's a lot of needs right now, so I don't think I want to get into the needs part of that.
I'm just looking for an opinion.
Yeah, I would say when I think of what's happened with interest rates, I would be conscious of if you're gonna do a new borrowing, I would think about the interest rates on the new borrowing versus the interest rates that you're earning on the funds that you have, and just I would evaluate that as part of the decision-making process.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other thoughts before I move on? Okay, then I'm gonna jump ahead to the next slide, and this is just labeled as the other governmental funds. And what this is really looking at is, again, giving you a few years of history, but looking at your other governmental funds. They're listed on the side there, and you can see this is just their fund balance reserves at the end of the year at that point in time. Starts out with the debt service fund at the top. Again, you can see the balances the last couple of years, the $624,000 at the end of 2023, Again, that's the balance, that the reserves in that fund at the end of the year, and they are restricted. You do have to use those for future principal and interest payments. When you move into the special revenue funds, again, you can see the different funds listed there. You can see the amounts. I'm not gonna go through all of those. I see a lot of consistency when I look across that, by the way. The one item that I'd want to point out is the ARPA fund, and you can see how that's been zero each of the last 3 years. I just want to talk a little bit about ARPA. So when you received ARPA funding, yes, you had cash. There were also compliance requirements to that, meaning you had to follow the rules, you had to do the reporting, you had to make sure it was spent on eligible purposes. Because of that, it showed up as a zero in terms of your fund balance reserves each of the last few years. You had the cash, but it wasn't recognized as revenue until you met the requirements. In 2023, you spent, I think it was about 319,000 during 2023. That's not presented on here because, again, now it's spent. You recognize revenues and you spent the funds. Okay, any questions, let me know. And then the bottom category there moves into the capital projects. Again, you can see the capital projects fund, your equipment replacement fund, and then all of your TIF districts there as well. If I focus on your capital projects fund first, again, you can see the balance at the end of the year, 1.5 million. And I'd always say when you look at capital projects fund, always important to think about timing and your planning in terms of when do you borrow, the timing of when you receive the proceeds from the borrowing versus the timing of when you spend that money. You're borrowing it first and then spending it usually. And then just tracking projects and making sure that you understand what's left. As of the end of 2023, there was 1.5 million left in that fund. You've also got the equipment replacement fund. Again, you can see the balance and the history on that. And then when we move into the TIF districts, TIF 1, you can see the numbers in brackets, meaning they were in deficits. So the good news is if you look across those years, that amount of the deficit has been coming down slowly or steadily. At the end of 2023, the fund balance deficit coming in at 35,944. When you look at TIF 2, you can see the dashes, how it's been zeros every year. Just keep in mind as a reminder, you've got an increment sharing agreement where any excess funds from TID 2, if there's anything left, it gets transferred to TID 1, and that helps repay the deficit. So again, a great planning opportunity or strategy that was done, and that is helping you repay TID 1. TID 3, again, you can see the history there. You can see how that deficit has increased, again, because of some of the spending or the, I'll say the investments that you've made during 2023. And then TID 4, you can see the small balance there just as you're just getting started, with that fund. Any thoughts or questions on that before I move on? And I will say with TIDs, it's always important to think of and plan for what's going to happen over the entire life of that TID, not just where you're at any one point in time. Again, very, very common to make investments up front with the goal of recovering, so you just need to track that over the life of the TID and make sure you stay on track with your plan to recover your investment. Okay, so then I just wanted to move into the business type activities or the utilities. This first slide, looking at the utility commission, again, just giving you a snapshot, very high level snapshot of the results. You can see that for the last few years. And again, as a reminder, when you get into the city's audited financial statements, there's just one column for the combination of the utility commission, meaning water and electric combined in the same column. If you go over, we do issue separate financial statements for the utilities. When we get into those separate financial statements, there is a little bit more detail if you want to get into understanding what's electric versus water and whatnot. So very, very summarized presentation here. Again, the purpose of this is just to give you an overview or snapshot of what's happening. You can see the lines for operating revenues, operating expenses, and then operating income. That operating income meaning what are you charging for services, for the services that you provide. Those operating expenses are the costs that it takes to provide that service, and that operating income is really what's left, the excess of your revenues over your expenses. So you can see that coming in at $579,000 for 2023. In addition to that, we have non-operating revenues and expenses. Again, summarized presentation. That's the combination of things like interest income is included in there, interest expense is included in there. Again, just showing you a net number. If you look at the last couple years, or if you're looking at 2023 versus some of the prior years, you can see the positive increase there. Again, really driven off of investment earnings and what's happened with the market in terms of interest rates on your savings balances. That leaves you with income before contributions and transfers of $691,000. The capital contributions are capital investments that are paid for with other resources. Think of if a developer or a customer wants some certain infrastructure put in, they might pay for that, for example. So you see the capital contributions the last few years. And then we also have that line labeled as transfers. Again, notice the brackets, meaning those are transfers out, so it's dollars coming out of your utility commission. There's a tax equivalent in there, a statutory amount that really is calculated, disclosed in your Public Service Commission annual report. And those dollars come back to the general fund. So you can see that. That's why there's a bracket there. It does help out your general fund. And then ultimately, that change in net position, that's the sum of everything. All of your activities, operating results, interest earnings, capital contributions, and transfers. So you have a positive $443,000 increase in your equity reserves for 2023. So a lot of strong trends there. If you jump over to the next slide, again, this is just looking at that sewer. Again, same format. So you see the years of history. Again, starting down, looking at your operating revenues, expenses, and operating income. That operating income line, $320,267 for 2023. In addition to that, the non-operating line there, the expenses in brackets, it's again heavily influenced by interest expense in this case, and the amount of interest expense that you're paying. If you jump down to that capital contributions line, a little bit bigger than normal there, $559,000, primarily due to what's going on with some of your tax incremental districts. There were some tax incremental district number 3. There was a lift station project that was eligible to be done within that TIF district. So the way we account for that is we expense it to TID number 3 because it's an eligible cost there. And then it winds up being accounted for as a contribution, an asset over to the sewer utility. So that's why that's there. Again, that's a lift station project. And then the change in net position, $806,000, again, obviously heavily influenced by that capital contribution, but certainly positive to see your operating results coming in where they are as well there too. You have a question?
Just a quick question, Brian. On the different statements of revenues that you have, revenues and expenditures for the general fund, the utility, and the sanitary sewer, I noticed it's a little bit different formatting in the packet. And in particular, I was looking at the miscellaneous, like on the miscellaneous revenues, non-operating income. On the revenue side for the general fund is listed as miscellaneous, whereas in the other two, it actually kind of breaks it down a little bit further. Is that?
So there's a good reason for that.
Okay.
Okay, so when you get into your financial statements, governmental accounting standards and regulatory requirements determine what we present, what type of activity is, and where it's included with your financial statements. When you think of like your general fund or your TIF districts, those are considered to be governmental funds, meaning they're heavily supported by things like tax levy. We're required to follow the presentation that's included within the financial statements, so it gives a little bit different presentation of the revenues. When you have activities like the utility commission and your sanitary sewer, they're not supported by tax levy. They're supported by the charges for the services that you provide. So I know this is going to be a long explanation. The governmental accounting standards consider those to be business type activities, meaning they operate more like a business because you're charging that service, charging that revenue for services. So because of that, they're presenting it more like you'd see a business where they're saying operating revenues, operating expenses, and then those non-operating items. So it's really a difference in presentation because we're following standards.
No, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
It's something that I noticed. I mean,
Yeah. It's
generalized very big buckets of we we had approximately $120,000 positive or more revenue than budgeted, and then we were $100,000, positive to budget on expenses, whereas the other two kind of go deeper into the details of where did those non-operating revenues come from.
Yep,
So
yep.
I appreciate the
Yeah,
explanation.
no,
Thank you.
very good thoughts, and I would say, as you look at those different activities, the general fund is the way it is because it's your main operating fund. Keep focusing on that budget and keep looking at it just like it sounds like you are, so.
Thank you.
Yep, awesome. Okay, then in terms of financial condition, one of the things that I also like to look at, in addition to, those fund balance reserves that we talked about for your general fund, I always like to look at your long-term debt. So just as a reminder, this slide is labeled governmental activities, long-term debt. So it's not looking at the utility debt, it's not looking at your sewer debt. It is only focusing on general fund and tax incremental districts. That's what's included on this slide here. If you look at the different categories, you'll see the color coding for the different types of debt that you have. I just want to talk about the totals first before we dig into it. If we jump in and look at the sum of all those categories, at the end of 2022, the sum of all those categories was approximately 8.6 million, meaning 8.6 million of debt outstanding. At the end of 2023, you can see how that's come down a little bit. The total of all those categories is 7.8 million. During the year, and there's a lot of information on your debt. If you got in your financial statements, it's actually 4 pages. It's on pages 41 through 45, and it does break it down there if you want to get into governmental activities versus business type activities. If I just focus on what happened during 2023 for your governmental activities, you did not issue any new debt during 23, and you did retire or make principal payments, again, the sum of all these categories, of $764,081. So that's really what's driving that decrease, is those principal payments. If you look at the different categories, I'm just going to walk through each one of those, starting out with the red category first, your lease liability. If you look how that's changed from 2021 to 2023, every year as you make your lease payments, there's a principal component to that. The principal is driving down, or you're paying off that liability over time. I believe that expires or is going to be paid off in full in 2026. And again, then you move into different types of debt. There's revenue bonds, general obligation notes, general obligation bonds. Again, you can see the history over time. And I think if I just step back, the key is that you're tracking each of the individual debt issues that you have, which I know you are, and then building that into your budget so you know what you have, what you're going to have to make for principal payments, what you're going to have to make for interest payments, and then making sure that you're planning and incorporating into your budget. So I know you are. I just wanted to give you a snapshot of your debt, and again, kind of walk you through what's happened there. This does carry over onto the next slide. You may have looked at that already. But I do want to emphasize this next slide is only looking at your general obligation debt. It does not include things like your lease liability or your revenue bonds. The reason I like to look at this is there's a statutory limit in terms of how much general obligation debt the city can have. So that's the red line. You can see it's labeled as statutory debt limit. It's based on the equalized value of the property within the city. So when you see that line and you see how that has increased, particularly the last few years, 2022 you were at 12.5 million, now you're up to 15.4 million. What that's telling me is the equalized value of the property within the city is increasing, which is certainly positive. The actual amount of outstanding general obligation debt is the bluish gray line, so you can see how that balance has fluctuated over time. Again, coming in at 6.8 total general obligation debt at the end of 2023. And so again, you can see the trend there. One of the things that I always like to look at in terms of financial condition is to look at the gap between what's that statutory limit, how much can you have versus what you actually have. And if you see what's happened with that gap over time, it's expanded quite a bit. At the end of 2020, your limit was 4.3 million. Again, the difference between those two lines. If you roll that forward to the end of 2023, the gap between your two lines there is 8.6 million. again, heavily influenced by the equalized value, and you can relate to what's happened with property values in Wisconsin in general. So certainly nice to see that increase. And again, from a planning perspective, there's no right or wrong answer with regards to how much general obligation debt you have. You just have to stay within the debt limit. It's obviously up to the community and the board here to make sure that you understand what are the needs, what do we want to do, how much general obligation debt do we want to have, what are we going to issue. So as long as you build it in your budget, I guess that's the main thing, build it in your budget. Any other thoughts, questions, comments on that? Then I'll move ahead in this last slide here. I know there's a lot of information on here. I made a comment in reference earlier. There has been a lot of new standards that have been issued. I feel like every year I come and tell you about a new one that we implemented that year. The top of this slide, just a couple things that from a regulatory standpoint that we did implement during 2023. Again, all that was done based on what we're required to do. The Governmental Accounting Standards Board, they have been busy. You can see I just listed a few of the more significant standards that are coming up and will need to be implemented in future years. You can see those listed here. Those are staggered a little bit, so they're not all required to be implemented in the same year, but they do extend out. And we'll continue to work with the city and share information and make sure that they're implemented as required in the year they're required to be implemented. Certainly more information on our website if you care to dig into those a little bit more too. Okay, any other thoughts, questions, concerns? Okay, I guess I certainly want to say, thank you as we went through the process, had a little bit of turnover, during the process going from Amber, and then Aaron really stepped in and helped us out a lot through the year-end piece, and then Jamie coming in. So certainly want to thank your team for all of the assistance throughout the process. I know we ask for a lot, so certainly thank them for their time and effort. Okay. If any other questions do come up, please feel free to reach out.
Appreciate it, Brian, thank you.
Yep, very good explanations. No more comments? Now I'm looking for that motion to accept your document. Motion by Wayne, second by Kevin. Roll call vote.
Ortlieb,
Yes.
Kevin Schmidt,
Yes.
Swedberg,
Yes.
Boer,
Yes.
Dashlet,
Yes.
Wayne Schmidt,
Yes.
Meverden.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks again.
Thank
Appreciate
you,
it.
Brian.
Take it easy, Brian, thank you.
And then we'll move on to the copy machine lease. I believe that's Jamie.
Yeah, so there's a resolution in your packet that just encompasses what we talked about on, I don't know the date, the Finance and Personnel Committee meeting. So it is to enter into a contract with Rhyme for a new copy machine lease here at City Hall. Any questions?
Do we do this every year?
No, nope, our existing copier is going to be unserviceable here in the near future. So this would be entering into a 5-year lease with this company. The lease payment is paid every month, and it includes so many color and black copies, and then all of the toner and everything we would need for it. We just basically have to buy the
We're getting a
paper.
brand new machine.
We are getting a brand new machine.
Yeah, and
Yep.
it includes a bunch of maintenance too, I saw
Yep.
on there, so.
What are we doing with the old one? Is that, they take
Are they
it back?
taking it
They're taking it.
for free?
The other ones do.
We're working through that process
I
still
have
to
been-
this
I
day.
have been for
Mhm.
6 months now.
Yeah.
I read through I had a couple of questions and I called Jamie today, she answered things.
Should we add that to the motion, that they're gonna take the other ones?
Yeah, make sure that's in there.
We still owe money on those machines. And through US Bank, they have all of a sudden just became, when I called them and said, we're sending them back, give me the total and set up transport to get them picked up and get them out of here. That was the last thing I've heard. Now they don't wanna talk anymore.
Stop making the payment. No, I'm kidding.
We haven't made a payment.
Oh,
Maybe they'll write it off.
Yeah, we haven't made a payment.
oh. Interesting.
The only question or comment that I would have is during the discussion originally for this, is there was just to double check the warranty, making sure that it was ironclad, if and when there was issues during the lease period, that they would come and replace it. Is that confirmed?
So yes, they will, part of our warranty for the 5 years, they will stand behind the machine, fix it, whatever needs to be done. Supply toner, the only thing they don't supply is part of this dollar amount is paper. And they also, Ream has a thing, I think if they come back 3 times for the same issue and they have to put parts in it, they will replace the machine at 0 cost to the city.
Does any of the other entities in the city use the same company, by any chance?
This is a new one to us.
This will be new to the city.
I mean, it's the utility, or the library, or,
Yeah,
The library uses the company that we're currently using, for the one we have now.
correct.
okay.
I have experience with the company elsewhere, but
This one that we're going to?
yeah,
Well, that's why you wanted this one. Is there a kickback?
they were the cheapest.
Yeah, I saw the numbers. So you're looking for a motion,
If
Mayor?
there's no more discussion, yes. Motion to accept that.
I will make a motion then to accept the agreement as stated in the resolution.
Motion by Wayne,
I'll second it.
second by Lee. Roll call here.
Dashlet,
Yes.
Yes.
Ortlieb, Moore,
Yes.
Wayne Schmidt,
Yes,
Swedberg,
Yes.
Meverden,
Yes.
Kevin Schmidt.
Yeah.
Thank you. The next would be the cemetery policy resolution, 1200-2024. Aaron or Jamie, whoever.
Okay, so there is a resolution in front of you, resolution 1200-2024, to amend the written policy for the transfer of cemetery grave spaces at the Evergreen Cemetery. This just kind of tightens up our cemetery policy. When someone comes in and purchases a plot, we have a little bit more of a put together form besides what we traditionally use right now, which is basically just a note card. But it allows those lot owners to specify if the spouse, if the children, grandchildren, POAs, whoever, has access to the cemetery plot. So when down the road something does happen to that owner and there's an additional spot available, we know, or whatever staff is here at the time, which direction to proceed with that additional spot. This really comes into play too when you have families that have children, and sometimes, you know, two children say we want to go this way and another child says we want to go this way. This makes everybody sign off on it and takes the liability off of our shoulders.
so is this for new sales only?
No.
So are we gonna go back to every owner of a plot, or what are we doing?
We're going to, if somebody comes in and it's just X and Y on the card, and the child or a POA or somebody comes in, we're gonna start using this form with them. This form is gonna go with every new sale, but any old one coming in where it's not specific as specific can be on the cemetery card that we have, we will use this form with them, and if there are siblings or anything like that, everybody's gonna have to sign off on whatever they're trying to do or add.
So you'll only implement this if they come to you?
Yeah, we're not gonna go back, because we don't have addresses. That's the other thing with our current cemetery, the way we have it set up. We don't have anybody's addresses or phone numbers. It would literally be Mr. and Mrs. Lee Dashlet, and this is your spot, this is your, that's all it is.
Thought you were in a mausoleum.
No, I'm up at,
We'll see.
But yeah, so this is just to kind of get a little bit of a tighter wrap on it and try and make our lives a little bit easier too when it comes to this, so we're not being put in the middle of disputes or other
Is this-
things that happen.
Is this something that you looked at a different one, or did legal look at this, how, the wording and stuff, is it?
We did look at it. I believe we meshed it together from a couple different municipalities. And we did go through this with legal. I don't know that he looked at this exact policy because we've had this in the works for a while. We were just waiting to bring it to, this body. He did look at it and walked us through a couple situations that we've had earlier in the year, which is kind of what.
That's been a mess for many years
Yeah.
already. I can remember when I was on the cemetery committee, it was just people would come in and was, you were reaching from the clouds to get something straightened out.
Is there any more discussion? If not, we will be looking for a motion to adopt.
I'll make a motion to approve resolution 1200-2024.
Motion by Lee and second by John. And a roll call?
Dashlet,
Yes.
Wayne Schmidt,
Yeah,
Kevin Schmidt, Meverden,
Yes.
Swedberg,
Yes.
Boer,
Yes.
Ortlieb.
Yes.
Thank you. The next would be the Algoma Police Department Memorandum of Understanding, the Lateral Transfer Agreement Amendment. There's three names here, whoever wants to take off.
Go ahead.
Okay, so in front of you is the lateral transfer agreement that has been amended. We already have a lateral transfer agreement in place for officers who would be looking to transfer from another location, whether it be in-state or out-of-state. The wording that changed on this was on page 1 of 2, number 1. It actually gives the city a little bit more discretion, a little bit more ability to go after this. The previous one had said that you had to leave your place of employment to come to Algoma. It didn't give you any room to leave your spot, move to Kewaunee County or anything like that. You had to still be employed, accept the job with the city of Algoma, and then you would be eligible for this. So we wanted to open it up, give us a little more room. Let's say if we decide to hire somebody from Wausau and they're looking at relocating here, it gives them a chance to relocate and do that kind of stuff first.
so what you're saying is the old policy said you had to currently be employed
Yep.
by a police department.
Correct.
And now you do not have to be employed.
You do not have to.
Moving away because your wife wants to leave or whatever.
Yep, but it's at the
our
employer's
discretion.
discretion of whether or not you're eligible for this because
So
of
that's
that.
the only change from,
Yep, every other paragraph stayed the same. The paid vacation, sick leave, all of that, the wages, all stays the same.
and the union's okay with this?
The union is actually the one who drafted it for us.
Oh, okay.
That's where it came from.
Well, then it's gotta be good.
Desecration.
If there's no more discussion.
I see
we'll-
that word was fixed.
We fixed
Second.
the wording.
Kevin
That was
made a
changed
motion.
back.
Motion by,
Kevin made a motion
And Casey
and
seconded.
Casey seconded. Roll call here.
Swedberg,
Yes.
Kevin Schmidt,
Yes.
Dashlet,
Yes.
Meverden,
Yes.
Wayne Schmidt,
Yes,
Boer,
Yes.
Ortlieb.
Yes.
Thank you. The next would be the Police Department amending section 32-17 of the junk removal ordinance number 846.
This is something that one of our officers brought to my attention as he was doing ordinance violations, kind of making sure everything's as it's supposed to be. If you look at page 1, it's crossed out. The building inspector was the one who could authorize that the vehicles or equipment be removed. That's not in the building inspector's realm of things to do. So we just we cleaned up the wording to say the police department. Another one was that if you had a vehicle towed, basically this says that you can add it on to the property taxes. You cannot do that. So it clears it up to say the owner of the vehicle or the owner of the property.
and legal's reviewed this, and it's legal to do everything we're saying?
They have not, because we just cleaned up those 2 words. This is a current ordinance that we already have.
Yeah, I was just questioning how easy it was to enforce it.
To
As I
enforce
dri-
it
As I
as,
drive around town. I'm just wondering if this is gonna be something that the police department's gonna be able to enforce.
they're already doing it. But
Yeah. Is it,
they couldn't enforce it because
Right.
of this, it said that the building inspector had to enforce it.
so now we took out the building inspector, but I'm just asking if legal says the police department can legally enforce this ordinance then. That's all I'm asking, because there is enough of it around town, if, you know. Just said if there's some teeth in it, sometimes when we try enforcing them, then all of a sudden somebody comes back and finds a little loophole, and I just wanted to make sure that legal looked at it, but if they did, that's fine.
I guess
It definitely
that's-
needs to be done.
They haven't, because the police department is the one who's enforcing the other violations, like the noxious weeds, that kind of stuff. This one's just junk instead of noxious weeds.
So,
there any-
do you want it to go to legal?
I just thought, anytime you're gonna have something that's gonna be enforced, sometimes it's better to have another set of eyes look at, just to make sure that we're,
Sure.
because if you do take a ride around town, there's enough areas that this would definitely apply.
Sure.
And I realize with not having a building inspector that we had no one to do it, but giving it to the police department is fine, as long as that, it's gonna hold up if somebody goes to court with it and says, well, geez, did you read this here? It doesn't,
Yeah,
that's all
yeah,
I'm
fine-
asking.
Fine with it, if that's what we
You
want to
could
do.
make it the first reading and then we could come back and
Correct.
pass it at the
Yeah.
second after legal reviews if you so choose.
Is there some standard that we're working to or for, I mean, this is pretty short ordinance for this type of thing. I mean, usually you gotta say, well, there's gotta be at least 3 cars or something that
So
makes it exceptional that we can do this.
where the officer came to me is if you look at line 23, no disassembled, inoperable, junk, wrecked, or unlicensed motor vehicle. That's where it came to me was, hey, I'm ready to write these letters and send this out, but I can't because if you look at line 39, I'm not the building inspector. So that's where the enforcement came in, is we need to get this updated.
Now, when they say motor vehicles, are we just talking cars and trucks then? Are we looking at?
Because the motor vehicle could be anything that falls under having a motor in it, could be a
Well,
motorcycle.
It says boats, refrigerators, ice boxes, appliances, machinery.
Like
It-
an ATV, you keep it on personal property, correct me if I'm wrong, Dave, you don't have to license that unless you're on trails and stuff, right? So you can have an ATV there.
No, it still needs to be licensed for private use.
Private
So-
use,
So
yeah.
there still has to be.
He specifically mentioned disassembled, inoperable junk. Wrecked.
But if it has a plate on it, then you can't touch it, correct?
It has
If
to
it has,
be,
if it's licensed, even though it's inoperable.
No,
When we had that situation,
well, and it depends where it's parked, so yes, we've had that situation. So if there's license on it and it's current and up to date, and it doesn't run, then we're kind of in a pinch.
yeah, you got a fine line there.
Hasn't goes for
If it's sitting on
years.
the grass and not on concrete, now we have that option to move that direction.
Yeah.
It has to be stored in the garage on concrete, can't be on the side of the house, can't be in the backyard, cause then it would fall back to this policy.
Do we have any current fines or tickets associated with this and the fee schedule?
Yes, Dave, there's a huge range in it.
Right.
That's the same as the long grass ordinance and everything else.
Okay.
Is it?
But it's about, it also states there too, that it's at our discretion.
Correct.
I mean, cause there's, like, dealing with a situation right now, the vehicle runs and everything, it's parked on the grass, but it's not licensed. And the reason why it's not licensed is cause it's held up in probate. So we're trying to get it re-registered, but it's held up in probate right now, so that's, we've addressed it, and they came back and said it's in probate, so once it's out of probate, you guys can register it, but as long as it runs and everything's good, then we've been holding off on that, and then, but for the fee, it's just whatever, it follows the fee schedule.
So what would the council like to do with it?
I'll go along with Aaron's recommendation, just do the first reading.
Okay,
Correct. I would second that.
motion by Wayne and second by Scott for the first reading. Roll call, please, Aaron.
1 second.
Yep.
Meverden,
Yes.
Ortlieb,
Yes.
Dashlet,
Yes.
Swedberg,
Yes.
Boer,
Yes.
Wayne Schmidt,
Yes.
Kevin Schmidt.
Yeah.
And then, amending chapter 44-10 of the low-speed vehicle ordinance number 847. Matt or Aaron?
Yeah, me too. So this has been through the PPP, I think, for 3 months. It moved up here for adoption to allow golf carts in the city of Algoma. Or low-speed vehicles, I guess, which classifies as a golf cart in the city of Algoma. So this could be waived the second hearing, or we could pass it tonight and start this process to allow them. Has anybody gone through it, or I'm not gonna go through it page by page, so I'd take any questions.
The only question I have on this, and I understand this ordinance comes from another community that uses it.
Allows them.
And this applies in here, but it also applies to UTV and ATVs, and I've been getting some calls on this. Hours of operation. It says golf cart may be driven on approved public streets 30 minutes before sunrise or 30 minutes after sunset. Why we cannot put a set time? I mean, it's such a wide variety of times between summer. Why can't we put a time? Say you can't start before 6 a.m. and you can go no later than 9 p.m. or something like that.
Because the state of Wisconsin set that statute as the ATV, UTV. We can make it more stringent, we can't make it less stringent.
It's the hours of darkness is how it's.
And where this comes in is more with the UTVs, because we're getting a lot of them that are coming into town now. There's a lot of UTVs, everybody seems to own one, except me. But they're coming into town, they're going to the restaurants and stuff, and all of a sudden, the sun's setting, and 30 minutes after, they're getting somebody saying, hey, we could give you a ticket because our ordinance says. So the city has no control over that?
We could set a time and we could
But you
say
can
it's-
only make it more stringent.
We
You
can't loosen it.
You can't loosen
We
it,
could say it's 5 o'clock.
yeah. But you can't say 9 o'clock at night.
No,
For
we cannot,
example.
we can make it less, not
Because
easier.
it's just kind of hard for anybody that comes into the city that's not familiar with our ordinances, that know that 30 minutes after sunset, well, today the sunset's at 8:30.
But that's not our ordinance,
No.
Wayne. That's the
Okay.
state of Wisconsin's.
All right, that clears it
Yeah.
up.
So really, if they're operated on the street, they should know that ordinance or they shouldn't be operated on the street.
But that's in the city of Algoma.
No,
But-
that is throughout the whole state of Wisconsin, whether you're in Crivitz, Wisconsin, or you're in Algoma, Wisconsin, or you're over by Madison, or down by Madison. That's
when-
the state statute.
So all these people that go up north and run these at 30 minutes after sunset, they can't run them on the roads?
They cannot, that's state statute,
Only trails.
only on the trails.
But you can run them on the trails.
That
And
is
we don't
correct.
have any
We don't
trails in
have
Kewaunee
trails.
County.
We have just public roads.
Then the other question I have, as far as getting your golf cart certified, how are we gonna go about doing that? Do we have to bring it to City Hall?
You would have to bring it here, the police department will look at it, certify it. If they don't like you, they might, no, I'm kidding.
Well, we'll see, won't we?
Yeah,
I got a question.
you might wanna buy a UTV.
Golf carts have to have headlights like I have to have in my four-wheeler?
If they're gonna drive them at night.
Well,
If
by
they were
law.
manufactured
But they
with what
can't,
it
so.
says in the ordinances, they are requiring reflectors on them.
And some type of
I was just gonna
headlight.
bring that up, that,
Yep.
you can't just drive that old three-wheel golf cart with the tiller steering and no lights on it, cause there are
Well,
some
that's what I was wondering, do they
qualifications.
have to have lighting on this thing?
That was
Yes,
my next question, is you get some of these older golf carts that are buzzing around, they got no lights, they don't have any.
Headlights, taillights.
I wasn't concerned.
I don't have
with
blinkers.
All lighting must be capable of being observed at a distance from 500 feet.
Yeah.
Okay.
Minimum of 2 headlights, so page 4, starting at line 155.
It is worth mentioning that there was a letter that was sent in from, someone, I believe it was just prior to the PPP meeting.
Levi.
Well, there was a couple of them. Levi and Megan had sent one in, but regarding the confusion on registering and licensing. And for LSVs or slow-moving vehicles, you do have to register it through the state, but it's strict, right in the ordinance, it states that golf carts do not qualify as low-speed vehicles. So it is separate. It is handled by the municipalities.
Yep.
Worth mentioning.
Is it possible to eliminate the first reading, because by the time this thing comes back, it'll be September and
I don't think we planned on putting it in place until January.
January?
Because we have to put a fee with this as well.
we have to change our fee schedule or put something in our fee schedule.
Okay.
We had a set fee in there, and then realized that if we ever change our fee, we'd have to change the whole ordinance. So we went back to, if you read the ordinance now, it reflects to our fee schedule. So now we have to do something with our fee schedule, to adopt to this.
Take a chance. Like an empty for a golf cart.
That is pretty.
You know that, it's easier to ask for permission than to beg. Do you notice the word, Scott? Do you notice the word fee? Is it even carried over here?
It's the way it works. I guess, Chief, have you had an opportunity to review this? Is this gonna be enforceable? It's been a question for the last couple of months, especially
Right.
from our committee.
Yes, it'll be enforceable, it's just gonna be buy-in and educating everybody, and it's just like with the ATVs, we've been getting the questions also was about the hours, and, well, we never knew that, well, they never have never looked to see what the ordinances were anyway, they just, people just, oh, I hear I can drive, so.
Everybody
There we
else says
go.
we can drive it, so
So,
they drive.
yeah,
it,
so,
Well, it's gotta
I
be-
would recommend at least when we do register them, and it can be when we go out and inspect them, which I don't know. You know, that'll be something I have to go through, I'm not a ASC certified mechanic or anything like that. But at least they get handed the ordinance, so they can read, when they sign off on it, that this is, they're signing off that they read this, and they know this, and then, so. I have concerns with it, but yes, it's enforceable, so.
Well, I'll make a motion to approve ordinance 847 and waive the second reading.
There's no hurry, but you can do that.
Well, if
Yeah.
you're gonna, it's not going into effect
I
in
just wanna
January, so.
put,
No,
one,
why waive it if it's
Okay.
not gonna go into effect till the first of the year?
It calls for
do you still wanna waive the first?
registration, and
We,
we still don't even have
Okay.
registration stickers or anything, so.
Do we need to put that date? Because if we pass this tonight, do we need to specify that in the ordinance, that it's not gonna go through till?
Yeah, it would change line 270
Yep.
on the back. If we would pass it tonight, we would,
Why don't we just hold off? Just have the first reading.
Just, so you,
Just have the first reading and second,
so
don't
Mitch
rush because
has a motion for the first reading, if there's no more conversation.
I'll second that for the first reading, just for the first reading. Yep.
And Wayne seconded it.
and I don't think you need a roll call on it because they're not
Okay,
passing.
so all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Take care of that. Administrators report, Matt?
Yeah, just a couple of things. Myself and Casey, the contractor, and our engineering firm, Lee Dashlet, and the mayor walked everything through substantial completion with all the final matting being on all of Division Street and all of Frank Street now. There's about 50, I want to say 45, 50 items on a punch list that need to be addressed. The concrete, the blacktop, and Peters Concrete are working on that punch list, but for that, they have met all of their substantial completions. Just a key note here, upcoming holiday closure, Labor Day, September 2nd, City Hall will be closed. The TID 4 project, we are just waiting now with the RDA project, just waiting, everything has been executed. We've received full payment from them. They have received their building permit, and we're just waiting for times and dates of when that will kick off. As soon as we know that, I will pass that information on to everybody, meaning the city council and the RDA, and we will get that out to the public. So, fall partisan primary takes place Tuesday, August 13th. The polls open here at City Hall at 7 a.m. and close at 8 p.m. Absentee ballots have to be received back to City Hall no later than 8 p.m. on an election day. In-person absentee voting will continue this week, Monday through Thursday from 7:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. and Friday, August 9th from 7:30 a.m. until noon, right here at City Hall. So that is coming right around the corner here. 2025 budget. Myself, Jamie, and all the department heads have been meeting, and we will be getting something out quite shortly, or very shortly here, with everybody to start going through that and set up kind of a time frame of how the 2025 budget is gonna roll out, for everybody to start getting their eyes on that. So, unless anybody has any questions, that's all I have.
So are we doing the regular council meeting then on Tuesday the 3rd, or is that?
We have it on the next
Yes.
meeting
Okay.
date, yeah.
Okay.
Is there still any communications on the league annual meeting about councilmen going?
Working
I
on
noticed-
that.
I
We
know
should
you
have
were-
something by the finance and personnel for everybody.
Okay, okay. That's all I had there.
Anybody else? You want a motion to accept that report?
So moved.
Motion by Wayne,
Second.
second by Midge, to accept the administrator's report. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. I have no comments. Any,
Mayor,
Oh,
could
I'm
I just say something?
yes, absolutely.
August 25th, which is a Sunday, from 11 to 2 is the Ice Age Trail celebration at the boat club. There'll be ice cream and such, but it's just commemorating the opening of it essentially.
Okay.
Just to have that out there.
Yep, thank you.
What
Thank
date
you.
was that?
Sunday, August 25th, from 11 to 2. Boat club,
Everything's at the book club.
best things.
All right, any agenda items for the next meeting? Get Matt or Aaron or Jamie. And our next meeting date, Tuesday, September 3rd, because of the Monday off. And now I am looking for a motion to go into closed session pursuant to Wisconsin statute 19.85-1-C, considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility. Police department employees and 1/E deliberating or negotiating the purchase of public properties, the investing of public funds, or conducting of specified public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session. And this is for sale of city-owned property.
So move.
Moved by Wayne, second by Kevin. Roll call.
Sorry, moved by who?
Wayne, I'm sorry, by Scott. Sorry,
Okay.
Scott.
Moved by Scott, second by Kevin. Boer,
Yes.
Gottlieb,
Yes.
Kevin Schmidt, Dashlet,
Yes.
Swedberg,
Yes.
Meverden,
Yes.
Wayne Schmidt.
Yes.